All right, well, good morning, and let's get started here. Perhaps put in the chat what you think is the fix to the Great Depression. That'd be fantastic if you could do that. Um, Hopefully, Thursday is a good start for you. And so what I would like for us to do today is to continue our discussion of the Great Depression, and this time moving perhaps away from the causes to perhaps looking for solutions. All right, and so when I look in the chat here at what people are putting, the banking system seems to be the primary fix. And I think, what probably is frustrating about that was at the beginning of the 20th century, the Federal Reserve System, the banking system that we know of today, was created with the idea to help perhaps shore up our financial institutions around the United States. And if there is an economic downturn, perhaps to guide us through it. And it seemed like as we're moving into the 1920s, the Federal Reserve simply held the strings to our financial systems at bay and did not open it up or loosen it as we got into the financial crisis that becomes known as the Great Depression. Okay, so please make sure that you do get that assignment submitted, Causes of the Great Depression. You've had a few days to work on it, so let's get that thing done and have a good start to this, this trimester. Okay, Herbert Hoover is our president at the beginning of the beginning of the Great Depression, I should correct myself there. And he is unique in that he is not from the typical mold of being perhaps a president. And what I mean a typical mode is usually our presidents come from a variety of backgrounds prior to being president. And typically it was they were a member of Congress, whether a representative or a senator. They had been a vice president. They had been a governor, or they had been in the military. Herbert Hoover did not fit any of those criteria. He did serve in various presidential administrations at cabinet positions. So he was a cabinet officer, but he didn't necessarily fit what was like the four areas that I had previously mentioned. So like I have done before, I want to start off. I got a little video clip here about Herbert Hoover. And we have to, what I want us to look at Herbert Hoover, not only in the context of the Great Depression, but the context of his lifetime. So let's get this video clip started here.
Herbert Hoover died 55 years ago today. His name forever linked to the stock market crash of 1929 and the Great Depression that followed. But as Mo Rocca will tell us, there's a case to be made that the real Herbert Hoover was a far better man than the caricature.
In late October 1929, after years of rising to dizzying heights, the stock market collapsed, ushering in one of the longest and most painful chapters in American history. Herbert Hoover had been president for less than a year.
Who decides to call it a depression?
Hoover, actually.
Kenneth White is the author of a biography of Hoover.
Before that, they always called them panics.
Right.
He liked the word depression. I don't think he anticipated that it would be one that would be stuck to him for the rest of his life.
We'd like to thank you, Herbert Hoover.
And that's no exaggeration. Consider the 1977 Broadway musical Annie, where this correspondent first heard the name Herbert Hoover. A chorus of slum dwellers mockingly thanks the president.
Did the musical Annie annoy you?
What it did is it stoked in me this like burning dissent, like these people don't know the whole story.
Margaret Hoover is the host of PBS's Firing Line,
Who do you think would play me?
and great-granddaughter of the 31st president.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Okay.
This man lived 90 years, and he is judged for 4 of them.
And that's a shame, since Hoover's life before entering the White House was quite simply remarkable.
He lived here with his older brother, younger sister, and both his parents.
Oh boy, what a little house.
Yeah, it's 2 rooms.
Talk about a modest background.
Hoover, a Quaker, was born in 1874 in the village of West Branch, Iowa.
His father died when Herbert was about 6, and then his mother died a few years later when he was 9.
The orphaned Bert, as he was known, was put on a train and sent 2,000 miles west to live with his uncle's family in Newberg, Oregon.
Their only son was killed in a very tragic hay wagon accident.
So Herbert was essentially sent to Oregon to kind of replace the son that his uncle and aunt had lost.
In some ways, yes, but he definitely had to earn his board here. You think you would have been happy if you were weeding onions all day?
Sarah Monroe is the director of the Hoover Minthorn House in Newberg.
Was it an affectionate home?
Not particularly. I think it was very strict.
Absent the unconditional love of his birth family, Bert threw himself into work, determined to win respect and reward.
He had a deep, deep need to prove himself. And he also had an abundance of physical energy and intellectual energy, and it needed outlets.
He was accepted into the very first class of Stanford University, where he studied geology, preparation for a career as a mining engineer. Hoover's talent for turning around unproductive mines made him very much in demand the world over.
In his early 20s, he's running gold mines in Australia. In his mid-20s, he's off in China.
His relentless drive and his willingness to do whatever was necessary paid off.
He made several fortunes as early as his 20s and retired at the start of the First World War with about $3 or $4 million in assets.
Now, if Hoover's obit had been written in 1914, he would have been remembered as a talented engineer turned business magnate. But his response to World War I turned him into something far greater. When the war broke out, 120,000 Americans were stranded in Europe. Herbert Hoover, a private citizen living in London, assembled the ships to get the Americans home. Hoover followed this feat with an even more stunning one. Germany invaded Belgium and cut off its food supply. The U.S., still neutral, was reluctant to get involved.
Everyone was arguing they didn't have responsibility to feed the Belgians. Hoover said, "I'll feed them, let me through," and pretty much bullied his way through both lines.
Hoover himself convinced both the British and Germans to allow delivery of millions of tons of food to the starving Belgians.
He was dealing as though he were his own State Department.
As he put it, the feeding must go on.
Tom Schwartz is director of the Hoover Presidential Library and Museum.
How many people did Hoover and the commission end up feeding?
Between 7 and 8 million.
And he became known as the Great Humanitarian.
I still get emails and letters of people Hoover fed.
After the war, Hoover went from saving European lives to modernizing American lives. As Secretary of Commerce under Presidents Harding and Coolidge, Hoover set standards for everything from electric light sockets to milk bottles.
Get this, the dairy industry had previously had 42 different sized containers for milk. Hoover's the one who got them to do it by pint, quart, half gallon, and gallon.
And he brought order and safety to traffic lights.
He standardized it so red men stop, green men go.
He did that.
He did that.
But wait, there's more.
Hoover more or less laid the groundwork for the commercial aviation industry. He oversaw the development of what became the Hoover Dam.
And as the country's unofficial innovator-in-chief, Hoover was the very first person to appear on a live television broadcast.
He's a very modern man.
He is, yes, yes.
And in his spare time, Hoover and his wife Lou, one of the first women in America to earn a degree in geology, translated an ancient mining text from the original Latin.
I mean, they're real mining geeks.
This was published in 1912. It remains in print today.
When the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927 displaced hundreds of thousands, it was a foregone conclusion that Hoover would lead the relief effort. And he rode the resulting wave of adulation to the Republican nomination for president in 1928 and a landslide victory.
The greatest landslide in American politics.
I have no fears for the future of our country. It is bright with hope.
Only 8 months later came Black Tuesday. Franklin Delano Roosevelt would sweep Hoover out of office after a single term.
The Great Depression lasted twice as long under FDR than it did under Hoover. So why does Hoover get stuck owning the Depression?
Because when Roosevelt came in, he labeled it the Hoover Depression, and he never stopped calling it the Hoover Depression throughout the whole of his presidency.
It was FDR's successor, Harry Truman, who welcomed Hoover back into public life.
And Hoover is enormously grateful for that gesture.
In 1962, on Hoover's 88th birthday, his presidential library was dedicated, only feet from the humble dwelling he'd been born in.
What more can a man do?
Former President Truman delivered remarks.
His record in his career, it is unequaled in the history of this country.
By the end of his life, he was rather proud of the fact that he was the only living American with a depression named after him.
Are you serious?
Yes, he could joke about it. But it took him a long time.
To get there,
yes.
Before he could own it.
A long time. Yeah.
Okay, so just based on that little clip, does anyone have any thoughts about Herbert Hoover?
He did a lot considering the fact throughout his life, pretty much.
Yeah, he did. What was his nickname? Did anyone pick up on that? What his nickname was? This guy seemed to do so much. I mean, he was called the great humanitarian. You know, so if you would think of a person based just on that little video clip, you know, give us that, you would think he would be the person that you might want to have as your president when the Great Depression happened, considering what he had done in during World War I in helping get Americans, nationals that were living abroad back to the United States, and also delivering food to Belgians during the war. And then what he did to help modernize the United States in the 1920s, and the Mississippi relief after the flood of the Mississippi River. You know, so he looked like here is the one perhaps that could guide us through this depression. But it almost seemed like when he became president of the United States, a switch was flipped. So when we look at Herbert Hoover then, and we put him in the context of other presidents, right? I'm gonna ask you to throw a number out. We have 45 presidents, including our current president, Donald Trump, who's president number 45. We've had one president that served 2 terms, but not consecutive. That's Grover Cleveland. At times, we like to rank our presidents. And in 2017, a new ranking had come out of American presidents. Take out Donald Trump, because President Donald Trump, because he's still active president. You can't really judge an active president. And then take out, and just, if we merge Cleveland's terms together and just make him just one singular president, that puts us at 43 presidents. Out of 43, where do you think Herbert Hoover ranks among those 43? What number? Throw it in the chat or verbalize it. What number do you think? 1 being the best, 43 being the worst. All right. I see 40. Oh, I see some low numbers there. Top 10. Wow. Top 10. Okay. Remember, number 1's the best. All right. 27, kind of there in the middle of the pack there. Now we have to understand Herbert Hoover is a 1-term president. All right. And so he doesn't have a big body of work to judge on, one could say. And typically, we're looking at maybe about 3 good years as a president. Usually takes a little while for the president to kind of get warmed up. And then near the end of his term, if he isn't reelected, then things might come to a halt there. All right, so let me share my screen here. And again, there are a number of polls out there, but here, when I look at C-SPAN, which is for anyone who's a political junkie, C-SPAN is the network and the site that you kind of look at. Herbert Hoover is ranked 36 in the current 2017. And now I know it's 2020, but you can see that about every 8-9 years, C-SPAN at least reevaluates. And he's ranked 36 out of 43 presidents. And what they took into consideration, okay, and if we look at 43 presidents, economic management, so this is where the Great Depression comes in, he's ranked as the worst when it comes to managing us through our economic crisis here and I guess taking care of the budget. Dealing with Congress, his relationship wasn't really great, but crisis leadership is another thing. Here it is, the Great Depression, and his past track record would indicate, okay, he should be able to guide us through a crisis. He's ranked low for that as well. And then setting an agenda and performance with the context of the time also put him low. And when we talk about setting an agenda, really what was going to be his vision for the United States? I mean, we were roaring in the 20s. We had worked on getting back to a sense of normalcy and isolation as a nation. What was he really planning to do as president of the United States? And so falls a little short in that category as well. I suppose not a little, but a lot. All right. Anyone have any thoughts just looking at that? Now, if we put this in a global context, there's a lot of dynamic stuff happening globally in the world. I mean, as we have Herbert Hoover guiding the United States, Germany is in a nation of flux, and there's a guy with a small mustache kind of rising to power, Adolf Hitler in 1932. He's going to rise to power. And in that little video clip, it mentioned we had a presidential election in 1932. So it was a decision year for the United States as well. In Italy, Benito Mussolini's already in place, and in Spain, it's ready to break down into a civil war. So context, if we look at globally, you'll find crisis spots throughout the globe as well here. When we look at Herbert Hoover, he will live several more decades after the Great Depression. He'll see the United States be able to recover and successfully fight a Second World War, engage in a Cold War, but in the 1950s, see the economy really, really take off. And he passed away in 1964 at the age of 90, which would put him as one of our oldest living presidents at that point. However, we do have a current former president that has lived much longer than the age of 90, and that is President Jimmy Carter. And he is still going strong, and he is 96 years old. When Herbert Hoover had died in 1964, it was an election year, and they had stopped campaigning. Lyndon Johnson and Barry Goldwater stopped campaigning to honor Herbert Hoover. But then they picked up again, and Lyndon Johnson won in a landslide in 1964. Okay, so with that, Herbert Hoover, any final thoughts on it? I suppose you're curious who's number one. Does anyone know who's number one?
Yeah.
Well, who's number one? What do you think, Molly? Since you're...
I don't know.
Oh. Well, he is a person on our money. So there we go. The guy on the $5 bill. $5 bill. Abraham Lincoln. All right. Is the number one. Now, the guy who takes over, Franklin D. Roosevelt, when he gets elected in 32 and takes over in 1933, he is considered the number 3 president. And so here you've got one of the low ranking, and then you got a high ranking one. All right. This is in 2017, though. I imagine, with some of the events that have happened in 2020, that maybe some of these individuals might get some reevaluation perhaps the next time they do that, and see what happens with that as well. But Abraham Lincoln is number one. And our former president here, Barack Obama, comes in at number 12. All right. So with that, your assignment is the presidential Hoover and the Great Depression. So we need to find out his approach. Would it be fair to say he is a successful man in private life? Can someone give me a yes or put in the yes or no in the chat, or verbalize it? Is he a successful man? Okay, he's a yes. He's a guy who had said at one point, if you're not a millionaire by the age of 40, you're not much of a person. Well, I'm 53. I'm not a millionaire, so I don't fit that criteria. But that just shows he's a self-made individual. You from that little clip, you saw his background, not the most stable and easy background, and he's able to become very, very successful. All right, and there was an idea called rugged individualism. So he kind of is like identifies that. It's kind of like he fits it. And we in the United States, up to that point, had always talked about this idea of you determine your own destiny in some ways. Rugged individualism, you are responsible for your happiness and your success and all that stuff. Now we have a Great Depression, though, and it's going to challenge that. So in this assignment, so hopefully you download it, and if you're not, please do. And it won't take that long. It's a reading assignment, so it's just a guided reading strategy. So, and the handout is also attached to this, and so you shouldn't have to do not GTS it. Do not go into your chapter textbook, but look at this reading. And we want to find out, what went wrong here. He's considered he's sometimes called a do-nothing president. Well, we'll find out he actually does some things. And so this is just a little historiography down here in question 2. Explain why historians believe Hoover was a do-nothing, and why historians believe Hoover was not. All right, so you can find people that are going to counter each other. All right, he is going to do something, but why does it go wrong? So when we talk about like reason 1, 2, 3, and 4, you should be able to find them in there. And really your hint is kind of look at some of the subsection headings, some of the big policy names, and you just put that, for reason number 1. I'll tell you right now, reason number 1 could be the failure of his agriculture policies. So there's your hint. So you might want to somehow jot that down, failure of agriculture policies. And then down below it, just explain in 2 or 3 sentences, why his agricultural policies failed to hit the mark. All right. And so then also think of reasons number 2, 3, and 4 there. Answer the 2 questions on historiography about him being a do-nothing president or not being a do-nothing president. And then finally, the summary question, because we always like that summary question there. How effectively did Hoover deal with problems caused by the Great Depression? You want to make a claim on the question and give 2 supporting statements with evidence. So if you think he did effectively deal with the problems of the Great Depression, give me 2 reasons why. Or if you think he did not effectively deal with the Great Depression, give me 2 reasons why with some evidence. And you simply can just go back and use this information up here to help you answer this as well. Okay. So do we have any questions on this assignment? All right, this is a one-dayer type of assignment, so you'll see that it is due at 11:59 tonight, so it should not take you that long. Oh, any questions about this? Just want to make sure everyone is good here. All right, so hopefully be able to have access to it. Before I cut you loose here, tomorrow we will not have a live Google Meet. I will be absent. However, I will post. So I'll have a video post. So you're going to want to watch that dynamic video of what you have to do tomorrow. My daughter is on a college visit, and so we're going to go off to visit a college. And so that's why we will not have a Google Meet. However, tomorrow we will begin to look at FDR. Okay? So with that, I wish you a great day and have a super weekend. And so the next time I will actually see you, it will be on Monday. So with that, you can exit unless you want to stay on.